There are persistent rumors that continue to link Bill Belichick and Deion Sanders to NFL coaching jobs. What's real and what's BS?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm not saying I'm rooting for it to happen because I'd feel so bad for our guy Isaac Shade from Locked On Tar Heels. But if Bill Belichick never actually coaches a game for North Carolina, it would be kind of hilarious. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Kenton, on Thursday, reports start going wild, and these reports were actually confirmed by the North Carolina administration, the Tar Heels administration, that Bill Belichick, he's got an agreement, he's got a term sheet signed, but he does not have a signed official binding contract yet to coach the North Carolina Tar Heels, which is making a lot of folks wonder if that $10 million buyout is actually a $0 buyout for him to maybe jump back to the NFL.
It can't. I have a hard time believing it's going to zero. I have a really hard time, and let me tell you why. Allegedly, there was a lot of interest from Jerry Jones in Bill Belichick. If that interest existed and the buyout is zero, it's like seeing a woman that you really, really want with a guy that you know can't fight. You look a little more single than I thought. I know him. He's gotten beat up every time I've seen him get into an altercation. I think we'll be all right here. No, but in all seriousness, there has to be something to that term sheet that was signed, because if it is a true $0 buyout, there are a bunch of NFL teams that are looking for head coaches, and Bill Belichick will have accomplished the thing that he was looking for successfully. He's gotten the buzz and the interest around him stirred up to the point where multiple teams are like, let's kick the tires. Let's see what's going on there. So that's why I'm saying there has to be something else. And here's the thing. As much as I enjoy making fun of the Tar Heels, Tar Heel misery makes me happy. It really does. It gives me a joy and a glow about me. People have been telling me all the day, Kenton, you look like you're glowing. Well, I can't help it. There's a lot of Tar Heel misery. This would truly be one of the worst looks I've ever seen in college football. And one of those moments where even as a rival, I've got to feel bad. I've got to go, damn. Like a coach came and left like a thief in the night without ever playing a game for y'all or without ever coaching a game. And I would understand that some people's argument on the back end would be, well, you didn't take any money. Well, sure, he didn't take any money, but he still left you in the lurch. He left you in a position to where you did not have anybody, to where nobody was left as in the coaching carousel. Players are going to have a mass exodus, of course, because that's just the nature of things. And you're looking at all that. And for what? For what? When nobody else wanted to give you a shot, we were the first ones to get the ball back rolling on you, and you bail before. That would be a truly terrible look. And so that's why I have to believe that Belichick at least coaches 1 year before he skedaddles out of Chapel Hill.
Yeah, my take on this, I think the idea that Belichick leaves Chapel Hill without coaching a game, I think it's BS. I think that, and I'm not saying it's factually incorrect that he doesn't have a signed contract, because North Carolina confirmed that, but I think he's going to coach there at least one season. So here are the details. I believe it was CBS Sports who first reported. Presently, there is not a fully executed and signed contract between Belichick and UNC, sources told CBS Sports, and the school confirmed this week. Industry sources say that could lead to a legal gray area about how much, if any, of a buyout would exist if Belichick left for the pros. But then I'm also reading, Kenton, and I will admit, when it comes to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, sadly, I do not have experience in that area. Nor am I an agent or an attorney who oversees these sorts of signings, but I have done some reading today on this, and apparently it's not uncommon for time to elapse between the signing of a term sheet before signing a fully executed contract. So it's been about a month for Belichick since he signed his term sheet, was announced by UNC. That doesn't mean it's completely out of the ordinary to not have a signed contract. That's one thing. Now then, for what it's worth, Kenton, Belichick's general manager, Michael Lombardi, did come out on social media on X. Michael Lombardi's not that great on X because he once retweeted a fake Belichick account that he thought was the real deal. But I think this was from the real Michael Lombardi account, who said, Bill is recruiting in D.C. today and Baltimore tomorrow. His focus is on North Carolina football, hiring staff members, and developing the team. He said, quote, the NFL isn't an option, so please stop making it one, and thank you. And okay, so I'm going to take him at his word again, because it seems so absurd that he would take a job, Belichick, and not coach a single game. I think he's going to coach a season there. I also think, Kenton, that, you know, for other coaches out there to maybe be stoking the flames of these rumors that Belichick might bolt immediately for the NFL, I think that's beneficial to a lot of other programs in the ACC and otherwise. If you're negatively, I mean, Belichick's out there on the recruiting trail. He's in the D.C. area right now, Baltimore tomorrow. He's been traveling around the country recruiting. I think it serves a purpose for a lot of other coaches out there to say, really, you want to play for Belichick? You might not play a single snap for that dude because he might be out the door. Like, this is the sort of negative recruiting that happens a lot in college football.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the negative recruiting is going to be supersized if you are going up against Belichick, because there's a ton of things that you could say in terms of, hey, there's that aspect of he's not going to be your coach for all 4 years. Even if you're there for 3 years, he's not going to be your coach for all those years, of course. Or you could go with the he doesn't know what it takes to be a pro, because when's the last time he coached a good pro team? It's been quite some time. Or you could go with the approach of this young man or this old man that's trying to develop young men at a level that he's never done before. But I'll tell you what, when a story makes national news, right? Again, complete uniqueness of Belichick aside, complete uniqueness of North Carolina aside, if any story negative makes the national media, right? If there was a story about Mario Cristobal or Dave Doran, like, oh yeah, they drink a whole gallon of milk every day and they're both lactose intolerant. Their meeting rooms stink because they're farting up the place. If that made national news, that's an easy recruit. That's an easy thing to say. Oh, look at the old fart boy over there. That's who you want to play for. You know, you're going to have Febreze in your meeting room. Is that
How
what
about
you want?
this? You want to play for Fran Brown at Syracuse? He hasn't showered in weeks.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So when you're looking at a story that becomes national, there is no way to avoid it being a great point of, hey, you can go over there to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, but, you know, I mean, do you know who your coach is going to be? Do you know who your quarterback is going to be? Do you know who your you know, it's all these questions that are just up in the air there. And so whether or not they're substantive or not, I've seen the game of recruiting up close and personal. I've dealt with coaches and the lies and half-truths and misinformation they will give you on the recruiting trail. Again, as the person receiving the information and looking at it, I've seen it on the outside as well with guys who, you know, my young bucks from Cass Tech, who I hear some of the stuff coaches, where I hear some of the stuff coaches tell them, and I'm like, hey, that ain't what it is. So obviously it's going to be a negative recruiting point. Bill just made that job a little bit harder just by being who he is.
Now, I think there's more substance to the Deion Sanders rumors, and we'll tell you why. And also, there would be an ACC tie-in if Coach Prime were to bolt for the NFL. We'll explain what that is. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. I'm so glad that Prizepicks is with us. Guys, I've been playing Prizepicks since 2021. This is the best place to get real money sports action on Prizepicks. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. And yeah, it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on that action than Prizepicks. Here's how it works, guys. You simply select 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players and pick more or less than on their stat projections. And if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. I can make mine in less than 60 seconds. For me, I'm all about the hot takes this season. This week on Prizepicks, we're looking at Lamar Jackson for more than 250 passing yards, Travis Kelce for more than 70 receiving yards. It's fun to predict and it's easy to play. Plus, with Prizepicks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out our other shows. Kenton Gibbs does an awesome job on Locked On Wolfpack, covering everything NC State. I host Locked On Canes, talking everything Miami Hurricanes. All right, so Kenton, there's been I'm starting to buy in a little bit more to the possibility that Deion Sanders could make the jump to the NFL, specifically the Dallas Cowboys. Now, his situation to me, I mean, it's different from Belichick because he's put a couple years in with Colorado, put a couple years in with Jackson State prior. It's not like he would be upping and leaving a job after being there for a month, the way these Belichick rumors go. And when I first started to hear about, Jerry Jones and Coach Prime having some conversations, I kind of thought, hey, this is publicity getting blown out of proportion. Maybe it is, but this reminds me a little bit, Kenton, of the way the Belichick to North Carolina rumors intensified. Because for the first several days, you and I weren't buying it. It seemed like a publicity stunt. It didn't seem substantive. We're kind of trending that way with Deion Sanders. And so here's what came out on Thursday from Ed Werder, veteran reporter, formerly with ESPN. He's a reputable guy, Ed Werder. And by the way, Ed has covered the Cowboys for many years. He said on Thursday morning, regarding Deion Sanders, I'm being told that he would almost certainly accept if Jerry Jones offers to make him the next Cowboys head coach, that those who are around him are encouraging him to pursue it, and that Jones is enamored with the idea. So I know, Kenton, we haven't advanced to the offer stage just yet, but it sounds to me like if Jerry Jones decides to make this happen, that Deion may be back to Big D.
This is a thing that is very real, but very foolish. This is a thing that is foolish because, to me, Deion Sanders going to the NFL is akin to former ACC great Lamar Jackson going to an offense where it's like, hey, not only are we pass first, our quarterbacks cannot run. Do not do any moving outside of moving to navigate the pocket. And don't get me wrong, Lamar could do it at a high level, but you're taking away his superpower. It just doesn't. Deion's superpower is the allure of what he brings to any program. He is going to make you an amazing recruiter out of nowhere. The highest rated recruiting class of all time for any historically black college or university came under Deion. Some of the best recruiting classes since Coach Mack was at Colorado came under Deion Sanders. Some of the best seasons that we've ever seen by way of those great players at Colorado. When's the last time Colorado had a Heisman winner before Travis Hunter?
30 years, 40 years.
Coach Mack was there, correct? Or who was the coach back then? Am I incorrect in that?
It might have been before Coach Mack. Who was the last Colorado Heisman winner?
But you get what I'm saying here. What Deion Sanders brings is something that is not as valuable to the NFL. It's just not. We have seen this time and time.
By the way, Rashaan Salam in 1994. That was the other one before Travis Hunter.
Okay, so 1994, so exactly 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And again, we look at this and we say, Who else could bring that type of star power to Colorado? But you know the crazy part about the NFL? Bringing star power doesn't really work in that way. It's not really that type of deal, right? If we look at the two guys who are front runners for MVP right now, again, Louisville great, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. How'd they get to their teams, Dono? Did they get there because, hey, you can't go against a hardball? If a hardball's recruiting you, you go. No, Doug McDermott, he's the hell of 5 recruiter. You know, he made that reference to that very sad day in America's history because he said that's the type of guy I am, and this is the type of program we run here in Buffalo, right? You said they got drafted. Well, I guess that just undermines again. And let me ask you this more so than anything
for
else.
Free agency, though, I mean, but I guess if you,
and
you want to be a cowboy, you want to be a cowboy.
And that's what I was just about to say. I know people are going to come at me and say, oh, well, you got to think about you got to recruit in free agency type deal. I understand. But let me counter you with this. Dono, and I mean this from a very genuine standpoint. You know, coaches have different archetypes and all that good stuff. When's the last time we saw a super recruiter from college go to the NFL and have success? A guy that was his deal. Like a guy who was your team. People don't look at Deion and say, hey, he's the X's and O's guy. He's going to have those guys. He is a master tactician. That's not him. That's not who he is. Deion, I would argue he's a culture guy. He's a culture guy. But he does it in a different way than per se a Dan Campbell would or somebody like that. But he's a culture guy. But a lot of things about his culture works for college ball players. It doesn't work. Sit in the front of your class, dress like a professional, do these things. That works for college guys. It doesn't work for the NFL.
Well, it seems very much like he gives off the vibes that, and I mean this in a positive way, like he kind of becomes a father figure, which is something that it plays in college, doesn't play the same way in the NFL.
You can't be a father figure to somebody that is a father.
Right.
What are you?
Fair.
No, come on. I got my own kids. What are we doing here? As opposed to a 17, 18, 19-year-old that is just, I wouldn't even say figuring out life, just experiencing a tip of the iceberg in life as that. It's a very different scenario. So to me, again, I think that Deion would be giving up. It'd be like Superman volunteering to live in a city that's filled with kryptonite. Like, you can do it. Sure. Clark Kent was still a hell of a journalist. Yeah, it's not. I think I'd like to fly every now and then. So, I think that would be a match made in purgatory more so than heaven. But we'll see how that works out, or if it works out.
Now, if he were to leave Colorado, and I don't think he would leave for anything other than maybe the Cowboys job, but the ACC tie-in would be, and obviously this would give an opportunity to every other college football team. If Coach Prime were to make a late jump and leave Colorado, all of Colorado's players get that 30-day transfer portal, and I would imagine, just given how how omnipresent he is and how he's synonymous with that program now, Kenton, I would figure if Coach Prime were to leave Colorado, what would you think? 70% of his roster would probably jump into the portal. I mean, think about pretty much everybody who's on that team, and he's only been there for a couple years, but when he got there, he turned over 90% of the roster. So that entire roster is there to play for Deion Sanders. So if he were to leave, it would be open season on Colorado Buffaloes. I mean, they'd be getting recruited left and right.
Not only that, but one thing that is talked about a lot in terms of people in Colorado, they're like, oh, Deion doesn't recruit exclusively Colorado like Colorado used to. It's not a thing where it's like these guys are like, hey, we play for the Buffs. Like, no, we play for Coach Prime. And right. Here's the thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing in a majority of situations. If you're like, hey, I don't play for the Tide, I play for Saban, that's just fine. That's just fine. And it was fine for years, but what happens when Saban leaves? It's the same thing with Deion here. It's like, hey, if you play for Coach Prime, that's fine. He is electric. He is a guy that people want to follow. He's a guy that people want to watch. I remember watching his show on Oxygen or Lifetime or whatever it was when they had the reality show where he, you saw Shador and Shiloh and little kids. Right. He's that type of guy, right, that you just want to engage with. And it's understandable that, some ACC teams could definitely bolster their roster with some of those guys. And I believe that number one left tackle that went out there, wasn't Miami like second in the running for him? Or
I think it was Florida State. I think Miami was in the mix, but I think it was Florida State, not Miami, who came in second for him. But yeah,
either way you
portal.
cut it or slice it, that I don't see why he would stay. I don't see why, a young man, I believe he's from DC or something like that, would want to be like, oh yeah, I just deeply enjoy Boulder. It's just such a great city. No disrespect to Boulder, of course. I'm sure it's an amazing city. I've never been, so again, speculation. I would be surprised if people are like, oh yeah, I'm cool staying this far away from my family without the Coach Prime effect that had him. Think about how many top recruits we've had that didn't get the TV time that he got. Why?
Oh yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because they did not play for Deion Sanders. So, I'd be and another ACC tie-in here, could his potential replacement come from the ACC? Which coach, and I'm asking you, Dono, which coach do you think would be most likely to make that jump over to Colorado if, Deion Sanders were to go?
I don't think it would be like the top tier coaches, probably like a mid tier guy. I mean, I don't know. Who do you think?
Dave
Doran?
Hate me for this. Listen, I don't think he's in a position right now to where he'd be a hot commodity, but I will say this much. Would you be surprised to potentially hear maybe a Garrett Riley's name thrown around there? Ooh. Would you be shocked by that? Would you be, would you be too taken aback to hear, hey, some of the big name coordinators in this conference are like,
no, it's a good point. It's a good point.
This is a guy that people are potentially looking at. I'm going to tell you, Tom Allen, while he did just get a new job, he was a head coach before. Would it be that shocking?
If he's got any nieces or nephews who live in Colorado, the excuse is right there, built in. I want to be closer to my family.
Oh yeah, for sure. But in all seriousness, there are multiple coaches that, and I know people are going to look at me and say, "Oh, you just named only Clemson's coordinators." There are multiple coordinators who have done spectacular jobs that will be mentioned among jobs like this, because again, you're looking at a job that's going to open up, and this is not an ideal situation at all, right? Like Boulder isn't exactly a hotbed for recruiting. It's not a place where you're like, hey, I got all this talent around me. You can't be beat in that regard. It's not a place where you're walking into a full offseason of recruiting and all that. You're going to have a decimated roster. So more likely than not, this is going to be somebody's first head coaching job, or somebody's going to be pulled up from the FCS ranks, as opposed to, like you said, a high-level guy, or hell, even a mid-level guy like a Doran. I don't see the appeal of saying, you know what, I need to go start all over again, start rebuilding entirely from scratch, and I need to do it over there.
Well, speaking of transfer portal in the ACC, we definitely have to get this dude on the show, because all of a sudden, from Saturday Down South, your guy Brett Friedlander, I've become a huge fan of his work, and he published a really good piece, Kenton, where he ranks the top 10 transfer portal additions in the ACC. Kenton's not going to like number one. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Oh, guys, we're certainly not done yet with FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. It's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you also check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does an awesome job taking you through all the big games and all the big storylines. Of course, he'll be talking about that national championship game before Ohio State takes on Notre Dame on Monday. All right, so Brett Friedlander at Saturday Down South put together his top 10 ACC transfers. And Kenton, do you want to take a stab, incoming, not outgoing? Do you want to take a stab at who I think rightfully earned that number one spot? You're muted. The big Miami lobby has you muted.
Oh, I already know who it is. I'm going to guess it's Carson Seamus Beck.
I mean, why not? I mean, he's also 24/7 Sports, On3 Sports, #1 rated transfer in the country, 24-3 starting record. I mean, the guy's got like Ken Dorsey's record. He rarely ever loses. Here's what Mr. Friedlander wrote about Carson Beck at #1. Beck is much different in style than the quarterback he's being brought in to replace, but the assignment is the same. Be the guy that finally gets the Hurricanes over the hump and delivers their first ACC championship. The Georgia transfer certainly has the pedigree to pull it off. He was a backup on 2 straight national championship teams with the Bulldogs, and his record as a starter over the past 2 seasons is that 24-3 with a pair of trips to the SEC championship game. If fully recovered from the elbow surgery that kept him out of the playoffs, there's no reason he shouldn't make a smooth transition into Shannon Dawson's high-powered offensive scheme, maybe even following Ward's footsteps to New York as a Heisman finalist. And he is currently tied for second in the Heisman preseason odds.
Am I supposed to be moved? Am I supposed to be I think the Ken Dorsey comparison, I like it for more reasons than you think, Dono. Quick question.
Here we go.
With Ken Dorsey, was he the reason those Miami teams were winning? Was he like the reason? Was he the guy where you were like, hey, if Ken Dorsey, if he goes down, the season's over. We got nothing.
I think he's better than you give him credit for. Now, Ken Dorsey was not an NFL quarterback. He did get drafted in the 7th round as a career backup, but Ken Dorsey was a really good college quarterback, smart, good decision maker, could get the ball out somewhat in the vicinity of Andre Johnson. And
you see how he refuses to answer? Tell me, Dono, was Ken Dorsey the reason when you looked at those Miami teams? Were you saying, if I had to list off the top 5 reasons we're winning football games, Ken Dorsey being on time and on target, somewhere in that top 5?
I think he was maybe number 5.
Maybe number 5.
But, you know, with Ken Dorsey, there were a few games where Miami had to put out backup quarterbacks like Derek Crudup, Kenny Kelly. He actually replaced Kenny Kelly as a starter, and it was not nearly as good. So Ken Dorsey's better than you give. How dare you disrespect number 11 like that?
I'm not saying Ken Dorsey was terrible. I watched those games. This is the thing, Dono. See, few people know this about me. I could not root for anybody in the Midwest because I was a Michigan guy, right? So I had to pick teams outside of the region. Obviously, the West Coast is out because USC was over there. Yuck. I was a Michigan fan. Can't do it. So what's the only region left? The Southeast. And you know who my teams were that I loved out of Southeast? Yes, I know it's very contradictory. I know y'all going to look at me crazy right now. Miami and Florida State. Those are my 2 teams that I watched in the Southeast, and I was like, oh, they playing some ball down there. They playing some ball. Warren Sapp is the reason I wanted to wear 99 my entire career. I'm not – listen, I'm not going to lie and say Cane's blood runs through me. It doesn't. But I was a Cane fan growing up. And you and I both know. And this is why I say Carson Beck is not bad. I'm not saying he's going to be a net negative. So I need everybody to dispel that thought because I know how fans get, whereas if you don't love a guy, you hate him. No, I like him. I think he's good. I think he'll be a net positive for Miami next year. New York, Brett, I love you. Hey. I love you, baby. I love you. What? I don't love that take. I don't love that.
It's not that ridiculous because coming off the season he had in 2023, he came into last year as a Heisman front runner, and that was before Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart failed him by not giving him a good enough offensive line, by giving him the most drop-centric receiver core in the country. You know, I'm not saying Carson Beck wasn't at least part to blame for it. He didn't have a bad season. The numbers just dropped off a bit. So it's not crazy to say he could be in New York. It's not crazy to say that.
It's not crazy. It's not crazy from the standpoint of he was predicted to be there last year. It is crazy when you look at he will have a better offensive line. Running game should be better. Running game should be better. And
I forgot to mention that the running game was no good at Georgia either. Yeah.
And the competition will be less than what it was in the SEC. Absolutely. Yeah. In the words of one Sean Carter, you can try to change, but that's just the top layer. Homie, you was who you was when you got here. Carson Beck is who he is. And I think that he's really good. I think he's upper end of game manager. I don't think he's to the level of playmaker. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you're not to the level of playmaker, your team has to be undefeated for you to go to New York. Dylan Gabriel, we saw he was not to that level where it's like, oh, hell, we got Dylan 40 every game. Cam Ward was that guy. You got Cam 35, 40 every game. Dylan Gabriel got to New York based on what? He was a guy who did good enough. He played well enough, and this team was undefeated. If I don't see an undefeated season for Miami, which I don't. I think that they'll have a great season. I think they got a great shot to get to Charlotte. I don't see undefeated. If you're not undefeated and the perception around the ACC is what it is, you have to put up gaudy video game numbers. I don't think Carson Beck has that in him. And it's not even about I don't think Carson Beck has in him. I don't think it's in Miami's best interest for him to get that.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think it should be more balanced this year. If anything, I thought they probably leaned on Cam Ward a little bit too much this past year. So,
for sure.
Man, I thought you were my enemy for a minute, and then here we go. We become best friends again. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. Next time, we'll bring you the rest of that top 10 list because we filibustered on number 1. So we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
At least we show up for work, unlike Congress.